Hello, everyone. Really excited today. I think we have a great panel here at the VR/AR Association's Global Summit. We're going to be looking at wearable equipment safety today, and this is a big topic. There are kind of two aspects of it we'll be drilling into today. The first one is people want to know that there are standards for AR and VR headsets when they put them on, to make sure that they're going to work appropriately and not make them feel sick, or guidelines on that. And then second, with this pandemic going around, we know that headsets do sit very close to our eyes and mouth and nose. And so there's been a lot of work on that front too. And we've got a lot of great speakers. We got Ibrahim Jilani, who is at UL. He's a global product safety development director for consumer technology. So he's been working on the standard and has a lot of insight on that. We also have Amy Hedrick, CEO of Cleanbox Tech, which is inventing innovative ways to sanitize, headsets and other technology that we need to use. And then we also have Wang, who's a doctor and the clinical associate professor of pediatric anesthesiology at Stanford Children's Hospital. Children's Hospital Stanford, and she'll talk a little bit about how these technologies and approaches are being used in the field. So I'm really excited, and to kick it off, we'll start with Ibrahim.
Thank you, Kif, very much. Let me go ahead and put the screen share on. So let me put this in presentation mode. Can you all see my presentation?
Yes.
All right. So Kif, thank you for introducing me. I am the product safety director at UL involved with consumer technology. And what UL is, just to give a little background for those who may not know, UL is a safety science company. We work for public safety as our mission. And we've been in business for 125 years. A number of standards exist that UL has published that has kept people safe from electric shock and fire and explosion. So there are many UL standards that are used in buildings, in homes, and all over the world with products that we touch every day. So UL takes safety as our mission, and the employees of UL are very focused on that. Lately, our focus and attention has been on the wearable equipment safety, and I have two things to share with all of you today. The first is some of the committee work that we do. UL is a member of the VRA Association, and we are actually part of the Safety and Security Committee. As part of that committee, we worked in the last few months with some of our committee members, the COVID-19 Industry Alert. And what this is about, we'll get into on the next couple of slides. And the second update that I would like to provide the group is that UL works on standards. And one of the standards that we kicked off at last year's VARA Global Summit is UL 8400. UL 8400 is an important endeavor for wearable product safety, and I do want to share what it may mean for you as a user of VR/AR equipment. So for the COVID alert, this is now published on VARA's website, and it's also a shareable document that is available to all. It's not just limited to the VARA Association, but anyone who wants to download it is free to download it. It is a two-page document that goes into the science of what are the ways in which we can protect ourselves from the spread of COVID-19 as we use shareable wearables. So, as you know, many wearable products like a VR/AR headset may be used by more than just yourself in certain environments, in environments at the hospital, at certain workplace environments. And if you do happen to have a situation where the wearable equipment it may be shared between yourself and others, there are some steps that can be taken to improve the health and longevity of the product and make sure that you can be comfortable with it. The main takeaway from the alert is that ultraviolet C light is a critical way to inactivate bacteria and viruses. So bacteria and viruses are things like your everyday microbe, to the SARS and MERS viruses that affected many people many years ago. And more recently, there are studies underway to understand how UVC light is working on the COVID-19 virus. So some of those studies are not yet completed, but there are some strong indicators that UVC would act in the same manner or similar manner to how it worked on SARS and MERS. And so that's a very good strategy to inactivate the virus from the surfaces of the AR/VR headsets. Other thing that the document provides is that, it's really important to follow what device manufacturers have said on how to use their devices, as well as to understand the way in which to use the UVC light products. So there are a couple of different types of products, and it's important to follow the instructions of those product manufacturers. As I mentioned at the start, UL is a safety science company. So one of the things that we're doing is we're putting up a lot of free information and free studies on what we're finding and what the community of researchers and scientists are working on within UL, as well as those that we're partnering with. So we have a couple of pages, a UVC support page is ul.com/UV lighting, and we also have a COVID support page. So these are just resources that if you need to have some latest and greatest information, we are constantly updating these 2 pages in the past few months, and we have a plan to continue that through next year, so that anyone who needs latest and greatest information and kind of putting together all the information that's coming from around the world, you had a couple of resources on how to practically apply that in a workplace environment or a commercial environment. There are some companies mentioned on the second page that are making products that have UVC light as the way to inactivate viruses. One of them is here with us today. Amy's from Cleanbox Tech is one of the products that are we talk about in this alert. And also, I'm thankful that Amy took part in the Safety and Security Committee as we worked on this alert. So her product from her company, Phone Soap, Proximity UV Clean, they're all making products that have UVC as a way to inactivate viruses. And by all means, we want to put more companies. These were just some examples, but if there are companies that are making product that is using UVC to inactivate viruses, please provide that to us, and we'll look to try to get that on our future alerts. We want to update this and keep it fresh. So if any companies are out there that are not cited here, please let us know, and we'll be happy to add you. Last little plug for the Safety Security Committee. For those of you who are interested in safety and security, please don't hesitate to reach out to our webpage, and we'll be happy to have more members join. I co-lead it with my colleague, Hedrick. He's out of Belgium, and so the two of us are working with the committee members to address different safety issues, as well as some security issues that we're looking to tackle in the future. Now on to the UL 8400 standard. UL 8400 is a very interesting endeavor for UL. For many years, UL has been the backbone to a lot of the computing and high-tech world. We do a lot of the electric shock and fire testing and certification for that industry. So every major manufacturer or even smaller manufacturer of laptops, tablets, cell phones, and other types of computing equipment do work with UL, and they do submit their products to UL to have them evaluated and tested. What we've noticed as things were getting sent into us for testing, especially the newer type of products that are more wearable, we kind of noticed that there is a little bit of difference between one manufacturer to the other manufacturer on what they will submit as being the request that they want to test and certify to. Now, some of that is normal because of features or capabilities of products, but in some cases we look at it and say, you know what, there is some substantial differences here. Is it because the standard that exists today do not address this type of product, or is it because of some other reason? And when we start looking closely at VR, AR, and mixed reality, MR, it's very clear that there are some things here that existing safety standards had not addressed. And there's also a whole timeline of different news media reports that are providing their thoughts on AR and VR. For example, just about 3 years ago, CNN reported about the health dangers of VR. Business Insider also talked about the side effects of VR. Consumer Product Safety Commission last year put it in one of their meeting logs that there was no safety standard for this type of technology. And then by the middle of last year, Forbes is speaking on the fact that there's risks for both VR and AR. And so when we think about these risks and what these things are they things that can be addressed through safety science and through standards? And UL believes, yes, it can be. It just takes commitment from the industry to want to work through those issues and put together the right kind of requirements so that any wearable equipment that has VR, AR, and MR capability, they meet a threshold, a basic level of safety to safeguard you as a consumer or you as a user in a workplace. So we announced in November that we were going to work on a new standard and started asking for the committee to be formed, what we call the Standard Technical Panel. And thankfully, by February, we had a draft of a standard out. And also in February, there was quite a number of companies and individuals that said, hey, we want to take part in the standard development. And they all applied to be part of the UL 8400 STP. So now the meeting started in June, this past June, even though we had COVID, we were able to get the meetings going, and 30 plus people have been meeting since June, 2-3 times a month to go through the requirements. The requirements of the standard are broken down into several clauses. There's about 13 main clauses in the standard. The first gives the scope of the standard and what is being covered by UL 8400. And the predominant focus of the standard is the head-mounted, virtual, augmented, or mixed reality headsets. Some terminologies and other things are defined in Clause 3, and construction requirements, a majority of them are being deferred back to an existing safety standard known as UL 62368-1. That standard has been the standard for the computing industry, so every hardware manufacturer is very familiar with that standard. So material flammability properties and other kinds of properties are being called out already by that standard. So it's 8400 is meant to accompany that other standard. And then really getting into the meat of the standard. So what are we testing for? What are we checking for virtual, augmented, and mixed reality? And there's a number of things being looked into: motion sickness, eye strain, allergic contact dermatitis, thermal cataracts, from closed headsets, biomechanical stress. Some of the headsets are pretty heavy, and what kind of weight moment does that put on your neck or on your shoulders? Head collision simulations. Some of the headsets are battery operated or have long cords, and if by accident you're not paying attention and something happens and you either hit a wall or fall down with this kind of headset, what kind of collision issue could happen? And so these things are being looked into. Other things that are being looked into are irradiance, exposure to radio EMF, and then some of the other clauses are actually looking at the age guidances. What are the ages that should be there for these kind of products? Things like spatial awareness and functional safety are also important engineering topics that are being looked into. And the committee, as I mentioned, there's 30 plus people in there. There's over a dozen manufacturers of AR, VR headsets taking part in the standard development. In addition, governments are taking part. The Consumer Product Safety Commission of the United States, a couple of the National Research Council of Canada, and a couple other organizations from government and academia are participating, because everyone can see that there's a need here to get to a standard on what this type of wearable equipment should meet. So kind of want to end with this question to everyone, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit more in the Q&A. Should you care that there's a device safety standard for wearable equipment? And I'll end with that, Kip, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Ibrahim. I think this is really fascinating. Just that there is a safety standard being worked on, and CPSC is pushing for it. I think it's something that the industry has wanted for a while. We're going to shift gears a little and this is more topical because we're virtual now. There's a pandemic going on. We're going to talk to Amy Hedrick, who's the CEO of Cleanbox Tech, which is based in Los Angeles, and they're using some of these UV technologies right now on wearables and headsets. And she's going to give some perspective on what they've learned and what the Cleanbox does.
Thank you for that lead in, and just hello to everybody. It's been great to be part of the safety committee. Ibrahim and Hedrick and a number of other people worked very hard putting the report together so we could give as thorough of a review of safety practices and best practices so that people could have a really good idea of what the options are and what their standards should be and how they can easily measure how their company's doing with those standards. So I'll tell you a little bit more about Cleanbox for those of you who are not aware. We are a UVC hygiene company. We are focused on our core CX series. We have 3 different product lines, but our CX series, which is specific to the XR industry, is designed around maximum efficacy for cleaning of VR and AR and MR headsets. So we focus on all of the major touch points on your face and head that are major contagion transfer points, your eyes, nose, and mouth. You know, where you, if you're sick and you cough or sneeze or touch your, nose or face, this is what's going to be the most impacted. And I know that Ibrahim has control of the slides, so if you don't mind moving on to the next slide. This is something that our company has worked very hard to do, is take our engineering and validate it against COVID-19. And that was no small feat because, as I'm sure anybody listening in here can imagine, most of the biohazard level 3 labs and up have been inundated with, processing various COVID-19 response efforts, et cetera. So we were fortunate to be able to get into a BL3 lab and test our products against SARS-CoV-2. So what we did was, it was because we were actually, we had a coronavirus initiative to address the shortage of PPE in healthcare locations in the US to begin. And so we were able to test a new product called Clean Defense on N95 masks. So we inoculated 3 layers of an N95 mask with SARS-CoV-2, and then we tested it on all of those surfaces as well as our regular product engineering. So this is something that's unique to our product line and something that we were really happy to be able to validate. So moving on to the next slide, the product that, if you could, Ibrahim. There we go. The product that most people are familiar with is our CX1. It's been out the longest. This is a CX1. It has an adjustable hook for any kind of headset really that's on the market. And that goes from VR headsets to AR, MR, broadcaster headsets, earphones, and so on. Any kind of communication headsets and eyewear. And our product is independently lab tested. We've tested on a variety of contagions from COVID-19 to MRSA to C. diff and others. So we have, we always provide our lab tests for our clients. So if you are ever wondering about that, we're more than happy to answer those questions. But basically, we have 3 components for our product lines, and the first is the use of UVC light to decontaminate. What we do it a little bit differently than a lot of UV products. We use LEDs as opposed to tubes or mercury bulbs. And that's important for a couple of reasons. One, we can choose the exact nanometer wavelength that has the highest intensity, but without the mercury, does not emit ozone at that wavelength, and does not require a warm up like bulbs do. So it's as soon as you turn it on, push the button, it is immediately at full power. So all of our products are 60-second cycles, and we reach 99.999%. There's a 9 missing from there, but it's log 5 and greater in that 60 seconds kill rate against contagions. The next slide, please. So one thing, and this is partially a COVID response, really we just moved this up the innovation pipeline so we could release it sooner. This is a product that we're just announcing now, and it's going to be starting to ship the end of November. And this is called the Major. It's the first in our Star series. There are 5 products that we're releasing together, and this has a number of components that I think are useful for companies that are, they want to be reassured of the hygiene levels, but they also want to be able to track it both for internal management purposes as well as insurance and other things. So anything that you put in this unit will have full 360 decontamination that's equal across all surfaces. There's RFID tagging and hygiene tracking for an unlimited number of objects. There's an opt-in phone app. So if you, for example, you're a healthcare organization and you're at a nurse's station and you need to check in your cell phone or check it out, you can check that that particular object's hygiene history. It can give you reminders. Hey, you know, you haven't cleaned this today. You last cleaned it 6 hours ago. Whatever the case might be. There are other functionality as well. We're building in this and really. Again, as a response to understanding that as businesses start to get back to business, whether that's now or in the future, but we're going to all have to be prepared to address hygiene and decontamination in a different way. And next slide, please. This is the Clean Defense, which is the product I referenced before. It's specifically for N95 masks or any other kind of mask, but N95 being one of the harder to clean. This is a product, we run this at a 2-minute cycle because masks are, of course, worn on your mouth and nose, over your mouth and nose. We wanted to give extra assurance for those who are in healthcare specifically in terms of going between patients. You know, you can run your mask through the cycle and then see the next patient, for example. So viral load reduction between transfer points. Next slide. This is just the CX1 of our CX series. I don't think I have slides showing the other products, but this is 1, 2, and 4. So it just fits 1 headset. CX2 fits 2 headsets, and 4 fits 4. 2s and 4s have charging and locking functionality as well. They're all 60 seconds regardless of the number of headsets. Next slide, please. These are just some of our clients so that you can see we have a wide range of clients from shipping companies to telecom to content creators in the XR space, healthcare centers, and so on. And it's been really important because of that for us to maintain a certain level of consistency. We consider ourselves a premium UVC hygiene product lines, and it's important to us that all of our engineering continues to be validated across no matter what the use case is. I think that's the end of that presentation, and I just want to say thank you again. We're always happy to answer any questions that might come up, so I'll turn it back over.
Thanks so much, Amy. I really appreciate it. Those are cool. Our last speaker before our question and answer session is Ellen Wang, who's the Chief of Operations at the Stanford Chariot program, which is kind of at the intersection of medicine and a lot of these cool new technologies. And she has a little bit about how she's using AR, VR, and keeping it safe in a clinical environment. So thanks, Ellen. Ellen is on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Great. Yeah.
Okay, great. Just up front, in case I run out of time or forget, I want to thank all of the collaborators in VRAR, as well as the UL standards panel for doing just such an excellent job trying to advocate for safety. It's been so interesting over the last 6 months to see everyone come together to really provide guidelines and help us move forward safely. So I want to just give you a little bit of a background about this Chariot program. Next slide. First of all, I have no disclosures, though I am one of the board members of a new nonprofit that was founded last year to help us further distribute these contents and these technologies. Next slide. The Chariot program started in 2015 through some really hard work by two of my colleagues who were interested in using technology to distract children in the perioperative arena. And we started off with trying to reduce anxiety in that setting, but since then have really moved towards applying these technologies to reduce pain and fear and the need for anesthesia throughout the hospital within children and even in adults. So that's where the acronym comes from. Next slide. I want to recognize some of our donors. This is an incomplete list. All of our funding for the program has been fueled through research grants, private and corporate philanthropy. So thank you very much. Next slide. These are the 4 core team members. That's Dr. Sam Rodriguez on the left, Dr. Tom Caruso, myself, and then Dr. Maria Menendez. We basically run Stanford Chariot from one of the little offices at the hospital in our spare time. Next slide. We have 4 arms to the Stanford program, and we work in a multidisciplinary approach with our colleagues to help develop clinical protocols that help integrate these technologies into our workflows. We also study the effectiveness of these technologies in clinical and research settings. And then we also design and adapt custom hardware solutions and software experiences for our patients and providers. Next slide. These are just some examples of the different devices that we have used or trialed. We are really vendor agnostic, and so we're interested in trying out anything that's new, anything that we could apply to the clinical setting. So if anybody wants to send us things to try out or demo, we're happy to see how we could bring it into the clinical setting. Next slide. This is just some of the custom design software that we've built in-house. Much of it has been used for relaxation or distraction, but some of them have been used for therapies, such as 3D Feet and Alien Defense have been used in our physical therapy realm. And we've also used some for simulation and education. Next slide. And just to emphasize the reason why we've had to do a lot of this custom work is that software content development has really special requirements when applied to the pediatric setting. They have to be non-violent, calming, have positive messages, positive reinforcement. And the user interface really has to be quick and simple to start with minimal menus, really easy to learn. We're looking for a no fail state, no sudden endings, most of the time because we have variable durations in the length of treatments or the length required for the intervention. And oftentimes we find it helpful for there to be provider interaction and ability to adjust the different levels of stimulation required to modulate the cognitive load at points of the intervention that require more distraction. Next slide. I'm just going to briefly go over some pictures and examples of how we've used it in our clinical setting, but there are a number of different applications. Next slide. These are just a short list. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but we currently use at our hospital, and other colleagues around the country have used VR for periprocedural sedation, anxiety, and fear reduction. We've used it for vascular access, for phlebotomy and lab draws. Minor procedures both in the hospital and in the clinical setting, such as vaccinations or dressing changes, minor dental procedures, office procedures such as nasal endoscopies or dermatologic procedures, cast removals in the pediatric setting. Our colleagues in GI have used it for meditation and mindfulness for a lot of our patients who have chronic abdominal pain and abdominal conditions. Our physical therapy colleagues have used this both on the inpatient and outpatient setting to help with movement therapy, both post-operatively for rehabilitation, as well as in patients with already compromised motor functions such as cerebral palsy. Our acute and chronic pain colleagues have used these to help modulate some pain conditions like complex regional pain syndrome, fibromyalgia, chemotherapy-induced pain. And then in the world of psychiatry and psychology, there's been quite a few studies with use of VR for cognitive behavioral therapy in patients with autism, in psychiatry to help with anxiety or with risk modification. And then, of course, we've also started exploring using this for patient education. How do we teach providers and patients how to prevent disease, how to treat diseases appropriately? For example, we're working with our GI colleagues on how to help identify certain foods when they have food allergies. And it also has been used for teaching patients about their own asthma management and how to recognize when care needs to be escalated. Next slide. Here is a sample of the publications that have come out of the Stanford Chariot program through a lot of our work with our colleagues. And this is just the list from 2020. And we're very excited to continue with more of these research projects. Next slide. Here is one of our patients using VR for labor analgesia and relaxation. And then on the right side is one of our young patients who's undergoing a minor procedure, a implant in her skin with only local anesthetic as well as VR. Next slide. And this is one of our ENT physicians who is doing a nasal endoscopy procedure in the office on one of his patients. And then on the right, we're using VR to help educate and possibly reduce the need for anesthesia in our younger patients who have to undergo radiology procedures such as MRIs that require them to lie still for a long time. Next slide. Unfortunately, I think we don't have time to share this video, but this is one of our patients in our chronic pain clinic who had complex regional pain syndrome and really stopped using one of her limbs and then joined this program to try to rehabilitate the use of this limb. And she was one of our success stories. She started using our application. It distracted her from the pain. It really reset, I think, the way she understood her pain disease to be. And she started using her affected limb a lot more with using the application for physical therapy. It's really encouraging to see how more involved patients become in their treatment, in their management. I think it allows them to have more control over their disease and empowers them to do something about it. We've actually sent a few of these headsets home with our chronic pain population, especially since during the pandemic, we've had to shut down a lot of our in-person therapies. And so it's from what I understand from our colleagues on the pain side, it's been very successful. Next slide. Here are some pictures of our patients in our international mission cohorts who have used our VR headsets. And I just want to say that since the last couple years, the interest in using VR in medicine has grown tremendously. And now we are using a lot of these headsets in 20 hospitals, and it continues to grow. And as we've grown, we've realized that we, as full-time anesthesiologists, don't have the bandwidth to continue to support this program. And so that's why Invinza Kids, our nonprofit, was born last year. And so I'm happy to say that that corporation is really looking to help distribute the content and the hardware and to partner with anyone who's interested in using these immersive technologies in the hospital setting and perform research in order to provide a better experience in the medical arena for our patients. Next slide. I have one quick slide about augmented reality. We've been partnering with Magic Leap to study applications for use of augmented reality in education. And we're currently wrapping up a study using the software designed by our team to help facilitate medical education of simulated crisis situations. Now that the pandemic has really forced some of our simulation centers to close, we're really looking at different solutions to help enhance medical education remotely. And we've had a lot of positive feedback from our medical students who've been using AR for their learning. Next slide. And just a really broad overview of some of the other applications within medicine. Many people are starting to use VR to help with education of medical students, pre-medical students, nurses, mostly because there's sometimes a lack of opportunities in real life to practice or learn about these procedures on patients. So you can acquire some of the cognitive psychomotor skills from practicing in VR. And we're really looking to encourage a prolonged retention of some of these skills with increased practice within the setting. It's been great to learn about very difficult anatomical structures, really understanding the spatial relationships and being able to construct some of the mental models of the anatomy. For example, in congenital heart disease, it's really difficult to visualize that from a book. And at Stanford, we've developed some great VR learning tools for that. Our surgeons have started using it for pre-surgical planning to help with navigation of difficult tumors or difficult anatomical approaches to their surgery. I mentioned we're using it in medical simulation. We've also used it to help with onboarding for our providers to help with clinical assessment of training. And again, also there's a ton of pain research being developed using these applications. Next slide. So I first became involved with the UL group because of my presentation back in November at the VARA Global Summit. And it just seemed like a great opportunity to really collaborate with UL and many of the technology companies, really provide a balanced and informed approach to developing safety standards. These are some of the things that I've been really interested in, specifically in the pediatric population. How do we develop these devices, although not marketed towards children, often are used for certain situations in children? How do we develop these to address weight on the neck, strain on the eye, decreasing risk of falls, which can happen in both kids and adults? How do we develop the right materials to help with making it easy to disinfect? And I think that as we have come to realize, I think a lot of what we do in the hospital to try to promote hygiene and cleanliness likely needs to be carried out into the rest of the world. So looking for surfaces that are easy to disinfect, that are non-porous on some of these devices that inevitably do become shared, if not between friends, but within families. And looking at the use in children and encouraging research on short-term and long-term effects. Next slide. So here are two examples of what we currently use in the hospital. So I'm sure everyone knows about these germicidal disposable wipes. They're used often to basically disinfect all of the hospital services. And we do find the flexibility of the wipes to be helpful when we're using devices that are commonly being moved from one place to another, such as the perioperative setting. But we do have a Cleanbox, a CX1, that we've been trialing specifically in our oncology unit, where we have a specific room that's set up for use by our immunocompromised patients, an extremely at-risk group of patients. So we've put it there, and I think having more designated cleaning stations would be very helpful on the units. Another benefit of having a cleaning station such as the Cleanbox is a reduction in waste and decreasing the number of single-use wipes that we currently use. Next slide. And this is my final slide. I just wanted to show you some of the custom modifications that we've had to make for our hardware in order to make it wipeable. Those face molds that we've created for the Oculus Go's are silicone rubber, and we had multiple iterations to test for comfort level, as well as the straps that are used to hold the devices in place, and it's adjustable to different head circumferences, and those are made out of thermoplastic polyurethane. So all of our devices are infection control compliant and wipeable. And I think I will end there for questions.
Cool. Thanks so much, Ellen. I really appreciate that. You know, we've got maybe 5-6 minutes for questions, so let's get into it real quick. I'll start with Ibrahim. Hey, so obviously, you know, developing a standard like this, that's an expensive, time-consuming process. What was the thought process in starting to do this now? And you know, like, why? What was the impetus?
Great question. Thanks, Kip. So, you know, UL, the history legacy is that at the heart of who we are, we're a safety science company, and we're always studying the things that will, you know, could be done to make products safer. We have a lot of researchers, scientists, and engineers that work at the company. And I think really what kind of gave us that moment of pause was we started to see how popular in 2018 some of the headsets were now becoming. 2018 was a very pivotal year if you look at the market and how many VR headsets were being sold, and it was great. I mean, it's a wonderful technology, and we think it should be supported, and it should be continuing in its longevity with a lot of innovation. But with innovation, you want that to be balanced with mass adoption should be balanced with safety. So when we were looking at this, we said, okay, well, we see this trend increasing. We see that there's a number of manufacturers who are approaching us to evaluate their products, and they're all coming to us with different packages saying, we want to do these tests and these standards, and someone else will come and say, we want to do these tests and these standards. So we see this kind of inconsistency happening between manufacturer to manufacturer. And then we're also seeing the reports. We're seeing what, you know, CNN is saying, Business Insider is saying, what people are saying at the Global VRAR Association summits, as well as what the commission, Consumer Product Safety Commission, was saying. So kind of had this moment of clarity internally saying, look, UL is kind of the company that people go to solve the tough problems. And we're not afraid of tough problems. We're more concerned that we didn't do something when we were supposed to do something. So we kind of took on the challenge, and we started calling up all the manufacturers and saying, guys, we're probably going to go forward with a standard. We'd like to have you involved. We'd like to have the community. And
did you get buy-in? Was it hard to get that buy-in?
Initially, there was a moment of pause. Yeah, you know, I had a few of the manufacturers where I kind of gave an early presentation well before last year's VARA summit, and you know, they were like, "Are you sure you're going to do this, UL? Are you really going to do this?" And yeah, we gave some feedback saying, "Look, it's in your best interest. I know in the short term you might think that this, you know, putting safety in front of the commercialization might be how you're reading this, but get it the other way around. This is actually going to support that product continue on for a long time, because everyone can get behind a product that's been safety certified, right? So when you start to see that a product is out there, that there has been a consensus national standard with stakeholders from all over the country and all over the world really participating and helping to put down some requirements on paper, then when the products are later on certified to that, users in the hospitals, users at home, users in the workplace, they at least can have some assurance that a level of due diligence has been done. And I think that's what's critical, and that's why we wanted to do this, because we think that, you know, the public deserves that kind of care, and UL being a company that can help make that happen, we took up that challenge.
I have a question for Ellen. You know, you mentioned 2018, there seemed to be an inflection point, and Ellen was talking about how, you know, increasingly a couple years ago, medicine started to really look at the applications of AR, VR. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's really, you know, no line between what we do at work in medicine and what the public is experiencing day to day. So I think the explosion, the acceptance of these technologies really brought home to us the need to sort of explore some of these technologies. And we always try to harness whatever technology we have for its greatest benefit. So we started using it and researching it within the medical setting. You're
producing an incredible amount of research. You know, can you talk a little bit about, you know, the pathway from that research to, you know, insights or you know, what can be usable from the research your group is performing?
Yeah, there's a lot that we have seen that has shown us that when harnessed appropriately, these technologies will do a lot of good. Right. Okay. So we supervise in a controlled setting most of the applications that we use, and we have found it to be extremely helpful. What still needs to be done is whether or not, if left to users to do on their own without supervision, if there are issues with that. And so really being part of the panel and being part of the conversation, I think will help us understand, you know, how can we really take this technology and move it forward for its greatest benefit, but really minimizing both the known and unknown dangers that can come from overuse or misuse of the products.
Right. And Amy, I mean, I'm sure you have had the craziest year. You know, you're the CEO of a UVC company, and all of a sudden we got this pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what were you thinking in February and March when it was becoming clear that this was going to be an existing long-term thing, and you could make a difference? You know, was there a moment that you realized, you know, I've got a solution for this? It's, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we were already really seeing a lot of business, and we were very busy as a company and really had a strong upward trajectory before COVID. But I think, you know, when that started, one of the major things that happened was one of our clients, our enterprise clients, finance clients, had a number of units in the Chicago area that CX1s. And when people had to go home and start from working from home, at the same time, this was about March, there was a huge PPE shortage, and so they said, hey, we know UVC light is effective. Can we donate these to our local hospitals? And so what we did was we had a 10-day turnaround basically on a retrofit that we could fit into a CX1 that would allow somebody to hang their N95 mask in the proper way and decontaminate both sides of it. And that was just an initial response that kind of one of our customers said, hey, we want to do this. We said, we can help, let's be part, we can, you know, provide this at cost. And we did that. And that also led to us creating Clean Defense, which is a way of effectively doing that. So in terms of that part of it, you know, we're a startup. So the benefit of that is we're already used to being very agile and being able to pivot really as we see the need. And so that's really what we experienced. I can tell you it's been a lot of hard work this year. We're still a relatively small team, and everybody has been happy to take on, you know, just the responsibility and workload of saying, okay, you know what, we have something that we actually know it works. I mean, we spent years developing this, and here we are. Let's make it happen. Let's listen to the feedback of what people need, you know, and really listening and keeping a sense of the pulse of just overall business mindsets and consumers.
Cool. Well, I think this panel's wrapping up. I could keep going with more questions. This is obviously a really interesting field of AR, VR that is only going to become more important, but we are out of time for today. So thanks again to Ellen, Amy, and Ibrahim for taking the time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the VRARA Global Summit.
Thanks, Kip.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.